All right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. We have a continuation of our Painfully Honest series. This should have been the first one, but because it's about pain. so um, Today we want to kind of walk through the process. G. Michael Hoff, you've probably heard the phrase hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And it's this usually cycle that just kind of repeats itself. So we're going to talk about why that is, um, why the typically the great leaders have not only experienced but overcame, triumphed pain. So there's a lot of power to be had within pain. It all depends on how you choose to, frame it, as we'll find out, how you choose to deal with it, how you choose to overcome it. So with that, we'll introduce Dr. Roger Hall. He's a business psychologist, executive coach, public speaker, and multi-time author, and brings to the table a wealth of knowledge as it relates to the biology of how it is that we think. So we affectionately call him the neuro nerd on occasion. How you doing, Dr. Hall?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, Jared.
Yeah, we love having you. I'm very interested in this topic because I think a lot of people will be surprised at what could potentially be the purpose and the power of pain. I think it's an unrealized superpower, possibly.
I don't know if it's a superpower, but it certainly is it's a biologic imperative to have pain.
Imperative. I like that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
very
We,
good.
we need pain.
Excellent. Most people wouldn't want to perceive that, but we'll show you that it's good that you do.
We'll talk about that. Yes.
Awesome. Well, let's do a little bit of housekeeping here. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead here at My Home Connection, also known as MHC Realty. And our sponsor for today is the perfect real estate business. We've been developing this over the last couple of decades here, now in large part with collaboration with Dr. Hall, introducing many aspects and facets, attributes to your real estate business, from coaching to lead generation, some profit sharing models, things like that. So if you have questions about the process that we're trying to develop and reinventing the real estate business, please reach out. We'd love to have an opportunity to chat with you about it. So um, let's talk a little bit more about the imperative concept that you just mentioned. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, pain is absolutely unpleasant. No, nobody. Well, there's a small subset of people, masochists, who enjoy pain, but that's a subject maybe for a separate day and a whole
Agreed.
different type of podcast.
Agreed.
Um, but pain is a very useful function. Let's say perhaps as a child you weren't able to experience pain and you touched a hot stove. What would happen?
You'd get really burned.
You'd get really burned. You wouldn't withdraw your hand until a great deal of damage was done. So pain is actually a warning sign to tell us that there's something that we need to move away from or be aware of.
Okay.
And so it's a very useful function. I read a book once that described this process, that the problem with leprosy is that it wasn't that people would lose their limbs because of the leprosy, but what they would lose is their sensation of pain. And so they would
Mm,
damage themselves and not know that they had harmed themselves,
interesting.
wouldn't care for their fingers or their toes, and as a result, those limbs or those parts of their body would eventually be damaged so much that they would fall off. And in environments where, and this is going to get really gross, in environments where there were lots of rats, rats would then
Mm,
take care of that. And
wow.
so people would wake up in the morning with fewer toes than they had before, and that's because they were so damaged that the rats ate them, and they didn't know it.
Interesting. Wouldn't have thought of that, but it makes sense.
Right. So pain serves the function of teaching us, okay, this is harmful. You know, if we touch a hot stove, if we stub our toe, our body immediately moves away from that as a way to self-protect. So pain is essentially a dashboard warning light to tell us there's something that's not going right. Pay attention.
Gotcha. So that's physical pain. And then there's other pain, right? Kind of emotional pain.
You know, it's mediated by some of the same pathways. So let's look at loneliness, which is a kind of emotional pain. And what they found in a study was that people who took Tylenol, which is a pain reliever, experienced less loneliness than those who didn't. I'm not telling you to take Tylenol to cure your loneliness, because there are consequences to your liver for long-term use of Tylenol. So that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying in this experiment, it showed that people who took Tylenol experienced less suffering from loneliness than those who didn't. What it shows us is that emotional pain is mediated by some of the same pathways that Tylenol affects as it does physical pain.
Interesting. So as it relates to this slide here, because I do want to go deeper into that,
Yeah.
I had this particular slide at the end because I wanted to punctuate the idea that you're not going to ever avoid pain. So what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
And I think if we avoid pain, it can translate into just suffering for the sake of suffering, and it's not very helpful. So if you're going to have pain, make it have some positive experience in your life. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And your interpretation of the pain will actually mediate how bad it feels. So the way you talk to yourself about emotional or physical suffering will actually predict how much suffering you have. And we'll use physical pain again. Some people have so much fear as it relates to going to the dentist that they always have to be put under and have tons of anesthetic. I'm not afraid of the dentist. And in some cases, I've had fillings put in with no Novocaine. And it hurt, but it wasn't unbearable. And so the dentist said, just let me know when it starts hurting and I can give you some Novocaine if it gets too bad. And so in some cases, I've been able to get dental work done without Novocaine, and it hurt, but it wasn't, it wasn't life-threatening because of the way I interpreted it, which is, this is unpleasant, but this isn't going to destroy me.
Yeah, well, I think the suffering side is the unpleasant, miserable, no hope. This is just awful because there's no positive benefit to it. So, the next thing that I wanted to chat about is exactly what you're talking about, is reframing what your perception of pain is. Pain bad, avoid pain. And I think what we're saying
you do
is
want to do that. Yeah.
that's a bad way to look at it. It's not very helpful.
But you want to avoid the thing that causes the pain, not the pain itself. Symptom relief is good, but avoiding the source of the pain is even better. But the way we talk about the pain, like, I got hurt in a relationship and I'm never going to love again, and that kind of thing, or I was betrayed by this person, and you spend a lot of time brooding over it, ruminating on it, then yeah, you definitely are going to suffer.
Yeah, that's just misery.
That's misery. That's suffering. Again, pain is a warning sign. It's a dashboard warning light to tell you something's wrong. Pay attention. The more you worry about it, the more you brood on it, the more you rehearse it, the more unpleasant you will feel about it. So our response mediates how bad it is.
I like that. Our response mediates how bad it really
how,
is.
how bad we experience it. Yes.
Yeah, we can make it a lot worse than it is.
Absolutely. Just like the dental work. Two people getting the same dental work, one person tells them this is going to be overwhelming pain, this is going to be
Oh,
suffering, I'm run screaming out of here and I'm going to die. They definitely want the Novocaine.
right, right.
If you reframe it as this is unpleasant, then you can handle a lot more pain. And there's a lot of evidence that if you believe you're getting pain reliever, even if it's just a placebo, it
Mm,
won't hurt you as bad
interesting.
because your perception of pain is mediated by what you think is happening in your body. So placebos really do work. They change your own brain, your expectation of how much suffering you're going to have
Yeah,
is mediated by what you believe. And if you believe you've got a pain reliever, you don't experience as much pain.
interesting. So I heard you say, and I'm trying to repeat it the way you said it, but we try to avoid pain. But what if we reframed it as, hey, this is great because now I have yet another opportunity to experience pain and grow. So,
Well, back to the stove. Yes, this is exactly it. Which is, if the lesson I learn from burning my hand on the stove is stoves are bad, stay away from stoves forever and ever, always, amen, then
you're gonna
I'm
go
going to
hungry.
have a I'm going to have a tough time with dinner for the rest of my life. If
Right.
I learn, oh, I've got to be careful about this, though it's really useful, then I can go on and have a wonderful life. And so certain kinds of experiences, certain kinds of relationships, all of which can create pain in our lives. The goal is not to avoid pain. The goal is to avoid the thing that creates the pain. The pain is just a warning sign. It's a lesson.
Mm,
It's a thermometer.
mm-hmm.
And so if I learn the lesson that stoves are bad, I've learned the wrong lesson. If I learn the lesson that at certain times I could get hurt by a stove if I don't use a pot holder, if I touch the wrong thing on the stove, excuse me, then I can have a very functional relationship and respect for the stove as opposed to living in fear of it my whole life.
What do you think of this idea that if we experience pain, but yet we choose not to use it as an opportunity to, let's say, become a better cook or even a chef because we didn't learn to handle it, we'll always kind of go back into that pain. I know that's getting a little, uh, I don't even know, like meta or something, but um, do you think there's I don't even know quite how to ask the question, but it just seems to me like there's been a repetitive, a reoccurring theme in my life about certain things that had I looked into previous painful experiences and learned it way back, I obviously wouldn't go back through that again because I'd learned better. You know,
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, that's the purpose of pain is to teach us don't do that again because it'll hurt, or figure out a different way to do it so that it doesn't hurt. Yes, that's the purpose. And if you don't learn the lesson will be repeated.
so we it's just built into how we walk this earth is we're always uh, going to go into these experiences until we learn to quit doing the what caused the pain, and we learn what not to cause the pain because we got better and how not to get into those circumstances.
Yes, a person shared this with me recently, and I think it's a great example right here. Is that no airplane is ever on course. It's
I love that.
constantly itself to stay on course.
Mm-hmm.
And what pain does is it's one way of keeping us on course. And the more you deviate from the course, the more pain it will take to get you back
Correct.
on course.
Yeah.
So if you learn, you will self-direct and self-correct, and so the pain doesn't have to be as bad.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good analogy. I really like that one. So get stronger
I like
so that.
That's why I stole it.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So we've reframed it. We see that it has a purpose. We see that it's going to develop our character.
Wait. Can I pause there?
Sure.
We don't always see it having as
Can.
a purpose. It can have a purpose, and if we're able to find the purpose, then we can deal with it. If it seems like this pain has no purpose whatsoever, then yes, that does turn into suffering. So finding meaning in that is one of the important tasks of life. And if we look at Viktor Frankl, he said
Mm-hmm.
part of the purpose of life is to suffer. One way of finding purpose in life is to suffer nobly,
Mm.
which is really hard.
Instead of needlessly.
Instead of needlessly, yes. So finding meaning in suffering is in or finding meaning in pain, the way we're defining it today. Finding meaning in pain, learning from it, and if we must suffer, if we can find purpose in that suffering, if it progresses on and we don't find meaning, then how do we use that to build ourselves to be better men and women? And that can be the purpose of the suffering. How do I become better in the midst of this painful trial?
Well, I think that's a critical point that I hope our viewers don't miss here, because I did have these slides where it said, develops us into better people, makes you stronger, and where you corrected me at the beginning, said can develop, can make you stronger, and that's optional. It doesn't,
That's optional.
right?
Yes.
That's our choice.
That's
What are
all,
we going to do?
that's all our choice. And again, all you have to do is go back to Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Um, um, and he talks about finding purpose in the suffering of Auschwitz. And some people didn't and couldn't, and they ended up dead.
Mm-hmm.
Some died for other reasons as well, but some had given up hope and slipped into slipped into hopelessness and died without hope. And Frankel was able to get through it because he kept looking for meaning. He kept looking for purpose. He kept looking for beauty in the midst of that horrible situation.
Well,
You know,
I love that aspect of the results or the outcome of that development that you go through. Hope, I think, is underestimated in the power that it has. Here's a guy that, again, went through Auschwitz. I think he lost his wife and she was pregnant at the time. And didn't he lose his parents?
lost his parents, lost his life work. Yes, he lost everything.
Yeah. So out of anybody that could have lost hope, I mean, arguably, there's not many people that you could go, yep, I don't blame you. But he,
Yeah, right. But he decided that he was going to find meaning in all of this, and that he was going to become better as a result of it. Now, none of that was the sole thing that saved him. There were lots of other people who had hope and who had his mindset, but died anyway.
mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna survive, you got to have what he had.
Gotcha.
It's not a guarantee that you're going to survive,
Right.
but if you could survive, you're going to have what he had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how miserable would it be to not have developed the hope and still survived? I mean, that's
yeah. In his case, I'm not sure that was even possible.
right. I mean, your mind has to go one way or another, I would think, right? At that level, in that type of experience. Anyway, and it is a cycle, right? Because each time you experience pain, it develops you, makes you stronger, gets hope, right? It's not just a one and done. You keep doing it in different aspects of who you are and how we contend or choose to contend with life.
Right. And again, it can help you become better. And the more sensitive you are to life's corrections, the more you stay on course. The less sensitive you are to life's corrections, the less sensitive you are to pain, the more you're going to get in trouble.
So let's talk about, because I think Viktor Frankl's a prime prime scenario to talk about because we talk about suffering can cause you to focus inward.
Mhm.
I'm struggling to think of how Viktor Frankl can look into himself, and it'd be easy to blame everything else, right? Life is just horrible, and woe is me, and all these things. But clearly, he took it as an opportunity to look into himself and say, "What can I do?" And amongst all this hardship, all this, potential misery, what can I do about it?
Yeah, and the conclusion he came to was, I can't control the guards. I can't control the winter cold. I can't control that my shoes have worn out, but I can control how I think about all these things. Um, when he was in the showers, when they had taken the manuscript that he had hidden in his suit coat. So he had lost his wife, he had lost his parents, he'd lost his life work, which was the original manuscript of Man's Search for Meaning. Um, he realized they can take everything else away from me, but they can't take away what I'm thinking about and my control over my thinking. And so he said, okay, that's my last island of control, and I will control that.
I, I'm not making this up. As God is my witness, I just got chills. Uh, because I mean, just think of that. How powerful is that? Once you realize that they can't take that away from you, there's nothing that life, another human or life experiences can do to take that away from you. So
If you
own that.
choose give it, yeah, if you choose to give it up, you will have chosen to give it up.
But only you
And
can choose to give it up.
yes, yes, and but that doesn't mean it'll be easy. Which
Right,
and
right.
now we're getting into literature, but I mean, if you look at the book 1984, the protagonist Winston Smith, primary that was his primary battle, was the battle of, can they take away my notion of truth? And in that book, he lost.
Uh, I was had a lot of thoughts going through my head as you were thinking on that, or you speaking about that. But can you restate that for me? Because I think that's more
Oh,
profound.
about 1984.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the book 1984, the author George Orwell created a protagonist, the person in the story named Winston Smith,
Okay.
and in it, he was really struggling to maintain his sense of reality, the control over his own mind, and ultimately, the tragic part of that story is that he began to believe they must be right and he must be wrong on his conception of reality, and the measure of that was 2 + 2 = 4. And so, where Viktor Frankl, the real person, succeeded, whereas Winston Smith, the fictional character, failed, is that Viktor Frankl was able, through practice and rehearsal, to maintain that space in his head where he realized, okay, I do control my thoughts. I can look at the 3 leaves on this pathetic tree and see that there's life. These 3 green leaves, that's what will teach me that there is hope. That in the midst of this horrible situation, something can grow.
Isn't
And
that? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I want to hear what you said.
and these very slim glimmers of hope, but he was able to focus on those things in real life, whereas the character in the book 1984, Winston Smith, was not able to do that, and he finally succumbed.
Isn't that where we're at today? That our perception of reality. I mean, I don't want to be like hyperbolic or whatever, but
No, go ahead.
our realities, one where our focus is always shifting, right? I mean, I don't care what political side of the aisle that you're on, but when there's an attempt on a political candidate for the president of the United States and we forget about it in days or weeks, we're clearly uh, our memory is short. But then what we hear is also quite often challenging our perception of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we going to do about that? In 1984, that's an option.
That's an option. It depends on uh, where you are going to gather your information for reality. And if you gather it from a tiny little screen that you carry in your pocket, it's very easy to lose sight of what's really there. And so, with the clients I work with, I work very hard with them to get them to spend a great deal of time monitoring what they're putting in their heads. Um, because if we allow anything to come in unbidden,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that is, served up to us electronically, we'll be uh, we'll be in trouble. It's interesting. There are some social media platforms. People say, "Oh, I never go on there because it's also negative." Well, I'm on those social media platforms, and because of the things I choose to follow and the things I choose to look at, they're not negative. And so, I scratch my head and think, okay, you've made the choices by what you've chosen to look at and like and respond to. You're going to get more of that. And so I'm very careful about what I look at, what I like, and what I respond to,
Yeah.
because I don't want to fill my head with garbage.
Well, there's two things that you focus on quite heavily, and that is metacognition, thinking about your thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and then monitoring. You don't manage what you don't monitor. So
Correct.
if you're thinking about your thinking, and then now you're monitoring that, so now you can manage it. Like, hey, don't let this uh, you know challenge of reality, I'll call it that. There's probably a better term than that, but you know there's things that are challenging reality, telling us it's not you, what you're seeing is not what really happened. Well,
Yeah.
if you can monitor that and go, back to the source, right? Who who's telling you that? Why would they tell you that? Think
Yeah.
about what their ulterior motive is to sell you something different than what you know to be true.
Yeah. I can't speak to other people's motives, but so I don't know what other people are trying to make me do. I think they're just trying to sell something usually, and fear sells, anger sells, sex sells, but happy things typically don't sell nearly as much as fear, anger. I guess you could argue that sex is happy or can be happy, but
I'll share this, and hopefully this is helpful, but because it just popped into my head. But I have a friend of mine, a long time, many decades long friendship with a gentleman that's on the other opposite end of the political aisle than I am, and we challenged each other 2 days before and 2 days after the political debate to listen to each other's echo chamber. Right? You listen to my option for my typical choice for news, and vice versa, and let's listen to that 2 days prior. We watched the debate together, and then we listened to the news 2 days post, and it was a very interesting. I don't know, experiment, if you will.
it's a great experience.
Yeah, it was awesome, and it was kind of this challenge of truth by saying something 99% true, but with a nasty bent for that 1% of falsehood. That was one of my takeaways. There was several, but I thought that was interesting because they quite often on both sides would interject narrative to push views because of monetary benefit by their source of revenue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what's that common lawyer tactic, which is follow the money. Look for where the money is coming from or going to, and that's where the crime is. I think it's a wonderful thing that you tried this experiment to see how people who disagree with you tend to think. One of my disciplines is that I every day as I get my brief update on news, and isn't it great that we can now choose places that we know both agree and disagree with our worldview? And I do that every day. I look at least one, usually two sites that have a worldview that's different than mine, and then look at the sites that have a worldview that's consistent with mine, and then split the difference, and then try to figure out, okay, where are the people who agree with me overestimating it? How much of it is being a blowhard? How much of it is selling whatever is being advertised on their show? And the same is true for the opposite side. So I just pay attention to those things and realize that I need to hear all of this disparate information in order to make a good decision.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's bring that back around again to kind of the topic at hand here, and that is the purpose of pain. So, in two different scenarios, Viktor Frankl and then 1984, the outcome was drastically different on both sides. I'm thinking about Viktor Frankl. He didn't have much of a source of varying input. I mean, I'm trying to think of where he's at versus.
He's in a concentration camp, and he's only kept alive because he's a physician, and he's useful for a time.
Yeah.
And he knows when his utility is spent, that he's going to be killed. And he lasted long enough, but he wouldn't have lasted that long had he not had that right attitude. So where does he get his data? Well, he's looking at a tree, and reminding himself of that. He's one of the things he says in the book is that the best of us didn't survive. Mm-hmm. And so he paid attention to those who were generous with other people with their food. And he realized, okay, they died of starvation, but other people lived. There is some nobility. There is goodness in people. And he focused on that.
Yeah. Wow. So I think the takeaway is it's your choice. At the end of the day, look inward. You make the decision of what that pain in your life is going to do to you or for you.
And it may not always be clear at the moment. Right. Sometimes part of pain is wondering why this is happening to me. And sometimes you just have to endure for a time before it becomes clear that we don't always get answers right away. And that sometimes we have to endure pain for a long period of time before we gain meaning. And sometimes we never figure it out. Sometimes we suffer and we're confused and we don't know why. But that doesn't mean we can't become better people through it.
Yeah, and I think that's what I wanted to wrap up, other than going back to that original slide just briefly, but is, any significant amount of pain, anything, not just mild pain, because you could probably get over that, move on pretty quickly, but anything of any significance is likely going to change you. And I think the decision is if you're trying to simplify things in life like I am, there's two ways to look at it. Am I getting better or am I getting bitter?
Yeah, bitter or better.
And,
yes.
And monitoring that, go back to the thought we were talking about, monitoring where your brain is going and going, okay, is this bitter thought? Is this bitter thought? Is this bitter thought? Or is it better thought?
Yes.
And
yes.
And you make that decision.
Yes. I decide if I'm going to learn from this or if I'm going to spend my time in resentment to the people around me or the situation around me, so that I don't push through it and become better.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you add on to that if you're going to learn something, I could go through pain 10 times to learn the lesson, or I could go through pain once or twice. You probably got a lot more time in life to do other things, to be a leader, to help others, serve others. You know what I mean? Or do you just keep doing this vicious cycle?
The more aware we are, the less we suffer, because we learn from those painful experiences more quickly. Yes.
Yeah.
But we also have to be open to being taught. If I'm so arrogant to believe I know everything, then when the lesson is right in front of me, waving a flag, I don't see it. So my attitude, my approach to life, I have to be open to being taught.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, as I stated earlier, let's circle back around to the pain is inevitable, suffering is optional thing. I think if you just kind of keep that into the front of your mind, what are you, one, it's coming. It's not if but when, and then what are
Yep.
you going to do about it, and how are you going to grow from it? But other than that, if you could just let the folks know what the best way to learn more about you is.
Yeah, my website is drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com. You can find out more about me there. If you search me on YouTube, I've got a lot of long form and short form videos there. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do that on YouTube. You can follow me on most of the social media channels at Rogers 2 Cents. I have an online course on overcoming fear called Freak Out. Fear Less, Live More. And that's available on my website at drrogerhall.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, Dr. Hall, we always love having you on, and you just always bring a lot of food for thought, and hopefully great things to take away to help people improve their lives. We're talking specifically about business most often in the real estate business, but I think this is applicable into all aspects of who we are and becoming better leaders. So.
Well, Jared, you always do a great job setting this up and asking fantastic questions. And it wouldn't exist without your great questions and your openness to learning.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
On behalf of all the people who are watching, they're benefiting because of you.
Oh, awesome. I appreciate that. That means a lot. It means a lot. So anyway, with that, we'll wish everybody a blessed one. Take care.
Bye bye.